The night my husband handed me divorce papers, he was wearing a new cologne. Expensive. Something she must have bought him. He slid the folder across the kitchen table like it was a business transaction and said, "And I will never forget this. You should have tried harder." 10 years. A son I carried alone through 2 of those pregnancies because he was always traveling for work. A mortgage I co-signed, dreams I folded up and tucked away like old grocery receipts. Gone. For a billionaire's daughter who thought my life was something she could just purchase. I had $43 in my checking account the day I took a job, caring for a man everyone in town called unstable. Dangerous, even. His own family wanted nothing to do with him. What I didn't know, what nobody told me, was that this dangerous old man was about to hand my ex-husband the worst year of his entire life, and I didn't have to lift a single finger. If you've ever been discarded by someone who underestimated you, stay with me. Because what happened next still doesn't feel real. Make sure you're subscribed, because this one goes places I still can't fully believe. My name is Sarah, and I need you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I was not a woman who believed in revenge. I was the kind of person who apologized when someone bumped into me. I made excuses for people who didn't deserve a single one. That's the version of me Daniel married. We met in our mid-20s at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was charming in that effortless, slightly arrogant way that I mistook for confidence back then. I thought I was lucky. My mother thought I was lucky. Even my older sister pulled me aside at the wedding and whispered, "Don't mess this up, Sarah. Men like him don't come around twice." I should have heard the warning she didn't know she was giving me. The first few years were fine. Ordinary. We bought a house in a quiet suburb outside Columbus. I had our son Eli in year 3. I gave up my job in marketing. Daniel said it made more sense, given his salary. And I became what the world calls a stay-at-home mom, but what actually translates to invisible, unpaid, and completely dependent. I told myself it was temporary. I was still telling myself that in year 9. By then, Daniel had been promoted twice at the financial firm where he worked. We had more money, better vacations, a nicer car. On paper, everything looked like success. But in that house, behind that front door, I was raising Eli almost entirely alone. Daniel worked late. Daniel traveled. Daniel had dinners I wasn't invited to. And when I brought it up, gently, carefully, the way I'd been trained to, he would look at me with this exhausted expression, like I was a problem he didn't have the energy to solve. Then came Vivienne. I didn't find out about her the dramatic way. No lipstick on a collar, no accidental text. I found out because Daniel told me. Just like that, over dinner on a Tuesday. Eli was at a sleepover. Daniel sat down, looked at his food, and said, "I've been seeing someone. It's serious. Her name is Vivienne Cole, as in Richard Cole, as in Cole Capital Group, one of the largest private equity firms in the Midwest. He had been sleeping with a billionaire's daughter for 8 months. And he sat at the table I had set, eating the food I had cooked, and told me like he was canceling a subscription service. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I went completely, terrifyingly still, and he took that stillness as acceptance. Within 3 weeks, Daniel had a lawyer. Within 6, I had divorce papers. His attorney was aggressive in a way that made it clear money was behind every motion. I had a court-appointed mediator and a legal aid attorney who was clearly overwhelmed and overworked. Daniel got the house, our house, because his name was the primary on the mortgage. I got a settlement that was technically legal and practically insulting. And I got Eli, full custody, which was the only thing I fought for with everything I had. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment that smelled like old carpet and someone else's cooking. Eli was 7. He didn't complain once. That nearly broke me more than anything Daniel ever did. I applied for 14 jobs in 3 weeks. Marketing positions, admin roles, receptionist jobs. I was out of the industry for 6 years. My resume looked like a gap with a name attached. I got 2 callbacks. 0 offers. The $43 in my account wasn't a metaphor. It was a Tuesday. That's when my neighbor Pat, a retired nurse in her 60s who had quietly watched my life collapse from across the parking lot, knocked on my door with a folded piece of paper. "I know it's not what you're used to," she said, "but it pays well. Live in. The family is difficult, and the man has a reputation. But Sarah, I know you. You can handle him." The paper had an address and a name. Franklin Whitmore, age 81. The family called him unstable, paranoid. His own adult children hadn't visited in over a year. They were trying to move him into memory care against his wishes. They needed a live-in caregiver immediately, someone willing to stay in the estate's guest quarters, manage his medications, his meals, his schedule. The pay was 3 times anything else I'd been offered. I called the number that night. The estate was on the eastern edge of a gated community called Harrow Hill, the kind of neighborhood where the lawns looked like they were trimmed with scissors and every house had a 3-car garage and 0 personality. Franklin Whitmore's property sat at the end of a long, private drive, slightly separated from the others, like even the neighborhood had quietly edged away from him. I almost turned around twice on that drive. The front door was answered by a woman named Claudia, Franklin's eldest daughter, mid-50s, helmet of blonde hair, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes and isn't trying to. She looked me up and down in exactly the way you'd expect from someone who considers staff a necessary inconvenience. "You're younger than I expected," she said. Not a compliment. "I have excellent references," I said. I had Pat's phone number and a prayer. She walked me through the house like she was selling it, pointing out the kitchen, the medication schedule on the refrigerator, the emergency contacts. Franklin's other child, a son named Brett, who joined us halfway through the tour via speakerphone, spent most of the call explaining what Franklin was not allowed to do. No signing documents. No unsupervised phone calls. No visits from his old attorney. That last one stuck with me. I filed it away quietly. Then I met Franklin. He was seated in a high-backed chair by the window in the east sitting room, a cup of tea going cold beside him, a hardcover book open in his lap. He was smaller than I expected. Slight, silver-haired, wearing a pressed-collared shirt like he had somewhere important to be. He looked up when I walked in, and his eyes, sharp, dark, completely alert, locked onto mine with an intensity that made Claudia's earlier assessment of unstable feel immediately absurd. "You look tired," he said. "It's been a year," I said. He nodded slowly, like that was all the explanation anyone would ever need. Then he picked up his tea, took a sip even though it was cold, and said, "Pull up that chair. Tell me about your year." Claudia lingered in the doorway. Franklin didn't look at her. "We'd like some privacy, Claudia." She left. And I sat down. And I don't know why. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he asked without performing sympathy. But I told him. Not everything. But enough. The divorce. The settlement. Eli. The $43. The carpet smell of the apartment. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "My children think I'm losing my mind," he said finally. "I'm not. I'm just old enough to stop pretending people are good when they're not." That was the beginning. Over the following weeks, I learned who Franklin Whitmore actually was. Not the family's version, the paranoid, unstable old man who needed to be managed and contained, but the real one. He had built his first company at 32, sold it at 49, built another. He had a sharp, sometimes brutal sense of humor, a weakness for old westerns, and a habit of reading 3 books simultaneously. He was also, I came to understand, a man in the middle of being quietly robbed. Claudia and Brett had been managing his finances under a limited power of attorney for 2 years, ever since Franklin had a minor cardiac event that, according to them, had affected his judgment. According to every conversation I had with Franklin, it had affected nothing except his patience for being lied to. He couldn't prove it yet. They'd been careful. But money was moving. Accounts he'd set up for his grandchildren were being quietly drained. A property he owned outright in Scottsdale had been listed for sale without his knowledge. And his longtime personal attorney, a man named Gerald, who Franklin trusted completely, had been systematically frozen out. His calls screened. His letters intercepted. They think if they wait long enough, Franklin told me one evening, I'll either go senile or go quietly. He looked at me over the rim of his reading glasses. I have no intention of doing either. What Claudia and Brett did not know, what they could not have anticipated when they hired a broke, exhausted, recently divorced woman with $43 to her name, was that I had spent 6 years managing a household, a budget, a manipulative husband's paper trail, and a legal dispute without professional help. I knew how to read documents. I knew how to notice what was missing. And I had absolutely nothing left to lose. Franklin's real attorney, Gerald, had been trying to get a message through for 4 months. I found the letters in a drawer Claudia had clearly forgotten I'd have access to. I handed them to Franklin on a Thursday afternoon, unopened, still in their envelopes. He stared at them for a long moment. Then he looked at me. "Can you drive?" He asked. "Yes. Gerald's office is 40 minutes from here." We went the next morning. I told Claudia I was taking Franklin to a routine pharmacy pickup, which was also true. We just made one stop first. In Gerald's office, Franklin signed documents that Claudia and Brett had no idea were coming: a revocation of the limited power of attorney, an updated estate directive, and a formal instruction to begin an independent forensic accounting review of every transaction made under their management. Franklin was calm the entire time, almost serene. On the drive home, he was quiet for a long stretch of highway. Then he said, "You know what the worst part is? I gave them everything. Good schools, good starts. I handed them a life most people would consider a miracle. I didn't say anything. Your husband sounds like Claudia," he said. "People who mistake kindness for weakness. They always do, eventually." I kept my eyes on the road. "What happened to him?" Franklin asked. "After. He married Vivienne Cole," I said. "Big wedding. Her father paid for it." Franklin made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Richard Cole." I glanced over. "You know him?" Franklin looked out the window at the passing highway. "Richard Cole has owed me a very uncomfortable conversation for about 15 years, he said quietly. Funny how things come back around. I didn't fully understand what he meant. Not yet. But 3 weeks later, when the forensic accounting report landed and Gerald filed suit against Claudia and Brett, and when Franklin made a single phone call that I was not in the room for, but whose consequences I watched unfold over the following months, I began to understand that I had not stumbled into this job. I had stumbled into the exact right place at the exact right time, standing next to a man who had been waiting a very long time to remind certain people what he was actually capable of. Eli and I moved out of that apartment 8 months later. Not into the estate, I want to be clear about that. Franklin wasn't a fantasy. He was an old man who paid me fairly, treated me with dignity, and in doing so gave me enough time and stability to rebuild something real. But Daniel, who had told me I should have tried harder? Richard Cole's financial reputation took a significant hit when Franklin's legal team finished their work, because it turned out Cole Capital had been a silent participant in some of the same account arrangements Gerald's accountants unraveled. Vivienne's lavish wedding became a footnote in a financial disclosure document. Daniel, whose entire reinvention had been funded by Cole money and Cole connections, found himself standing on ground that had quietly turned to sand. He called me once. Just once. Said he'd been thinking. Said maybe they'd moved too fast. Said Eli deserved a more stable situation. I let him finish. Then I said, I'll have my attorney contact yours. And I hung up. I didn't forgive him. I don't plan to. Some doors, once you close them properly, should stay closed forever. The $43, by the way, I framed the bank statement. It's hanging in the hallway of the house I lease now, my name on the account, my name on the lease. Eli walks past it every morning on his way to school. He doesn't know what it means yet. But one day I'll tell him. It means we started from nothing, and we built something they can never take.